welcome on Word Out Community Channel, a show that focuses mostly on refugee issues, refugee storytelling, and people who are making impacts in the lives of refugees, people who are standing with us in every corner of whatever we are going through as immigrants or as refugees in this country, outside US. We're impressive with people who are helping to ensure that people are having protection or people are provided with the support they need. Today's guest is very amazing. We have met in DC, Washington, where we are doing much of work about refugee advocacy. And the guest will introduce himself and tell us about. So you're most welcome on our show.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
My name is Danilo Zak. I am the Deputy Director of Policy and Advocacy with Church World Service, which is one of the 10 refugee resettlement agencies in the U.S. We also do a lot of work overseas, helping to support refugees going through the resettlement process. And a lot of our work is about encouraging Congress, encouraging the Biden administration and any administration to support policies that bring refugees a better life, bring newcomers a better life here in the U.S., and make sure that our humanitarian pathways are working well and supporting the people that need to be supported. And also helping Congress understand the tremendous value that refugees bring to their communities. And so I'm super happy to be here today. And here in DC, we're holding our National Advocacy Days with Refugee Council USA, which is not just Church World Service, but many, many organizations coming together to bring folks to the Hill, bring folks to their members of Congress, and advocate for a change, a positive change on behalf of refugees and newcomers.
When you say bring folks from different part of the country, what are those folks you are talking about?
Well, a lot of the people who are coming are service providers. A lot of them are leaders in their communities. But a big group of the folks who are coming, who are here today in DC to advocate for the members of Congress, are those with lived experiences of forced displacement. They're refugees themselves. And that's part of what makes our advocacy so much more powerful, is when we have people who are able to lift up their voices and talk from experience, from their own life experience, about the challenges that they face here in the US, the challenges that their families may continue to face overseas. And so our goal here is not just for us, we're talking to members of Congress all the time in DC, but to have people be able to come and support advocacy and have the tools to speak for themselves about what needs to be changed here in DC.
So how does people's lived experience, their stories, impact advocacy in general? Like, how is that important?
It's so important because, as I said, I am based here in DC. I'm talking with members of Congress and their staff all the time. And, you know, at the end of the day, they get bored of just hearing from me. They want to hear from their constituents because we have a representative democracy, which means members of Congress represent the people who are in their states and in their districts, including refugees and newcomers. And so it really matters when refugees are able to tell their stories and get their voices out there. They take leadership positions in these advocacy conversations. They build relationships with the members of Congress and their staff. And it makes the advocacy work so much more powerful. I can't tell you how many times when I raise an issue, if a member of Congress has heard it from a constituent, maybe they've heard it from a refugee in their state or district, they're so much more likely to respond and act on that issue. So it's very important for refugees to be able to tell their own story.
It's nice for us also to know that our stories can bring a positive impact, and then being acknowledged by you and people who are already doing this is very important too. I'm so excited that we are part of the movement. Speaking of being in this, is this your hometown?
I lived in DC for many years. I currently live in New York City, but I come down to DC all the time. So
Because of this work?
Because of this work, yes.
Okay, so like what interested you to like, what was your interest or motivation to support refugees and immigrants?
Well, my father was someone who fled and was a forced migrant, and my mother's an immigrant, so I have a family connection to the issue. but I really started doing some local volunteer and service work in my community where I lived at the time in New Haven, supporting some refugees in the area, and really just doing some organizing in support of refugee issues back then. And that was 10 years ago, and so it's been something I've continued to work on since then.
Thanks. So speaking of Advocacy Days, is this happening every year?
Every year we want this to happen. I mean, there was a period during the pandemic in which we had to do virtual advocacy days, but now with everyone back in person, we're hoping to do this every year, bring as many folks to the Hill as we can to advocate on behalf of these issues. And so every May we'll be holding these advocacy days and encourage as many people as can join to join.
How many people are we expecting to participate in this advocacy?
This advocacy days, it seems like we'll have at least 300 total participants, and over 150 of those are people who have lived experience of forced displacement. Maybe they're refugees themselves, or were refugees, and so we're growing every year, and it's so important to have a lot of people be able to share their stories, because more members of Congress are going to hear from us, and year after year we keep the drumbeat going, and that's how you make change.
Okay. What are the top priority policies or bills that we are pushing legislation to take actions?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this year we've got a couple of really top priority legislation. The first one I would point out is the Refugee Protection Act. That's a bill that's really a visionary blueprint of all the things we want to see when it comes to improving the refugee admissions program, improving some of our other humanitarian pathways like the asylum system for people arriving at the border. It would make it easier to prioritize family reunification cases for those whose loved ones remain overseas. It would improve services for those who are here in the U.S., and it would establish a more dignified and humane asylum system that affords people due process and legal protection. It also sets a floor for the number of refugees who can be admitted each year, so a future administration could not damage or restrict heavily the refugee program. So that's an important bill. Another bill that we've been supporting is called the Afghan Adjustment Act. That would provide a path to permanent status for Afghans who are evacuated not under refugee status. They were brought here under parole. And that also allows those folks to get out of the asylum backlog. So it's really, when we support the Afghan population, all ships rise. All other populations who have been stuck in the backlog will face an easier time getting asylum, an easier time getting services, if we can make sure that asylum seekers are able to access that permanent status, Afghan asylum seekers who are evacuated. And then the third bill that I would point out is called the Asylum Seeker Work Authorization Act. And that's for folks who are arriving at the southern border. A big challenge has been they've been unable to get work authorization. And this bill would make it much easier to facilitate work authorization for those folks arriving at the border. And again, those are three important pieces of legislation. There's other things Congress can do as well. They can help fund programs that are serving people here in the U.S. They can do oversight, make sure the Biden administration is held accountable for creating a program that really serves people in the way they need to be served and supports people through the first few months of resettlement, but also beyond that, so that they have the support they need to really grow and thrive in their new communities.
The policy that addresses asylum seeker, is this like addressing the entire process of every asylum seeker in the country? Like we have had a backlog. We have had people have been waiting for years to get responses about their cases, and applications is just taking forever. All these policies just addressing people from the border.
Great question. So for the legislation, the House Asylum Seeker Work Authorization Act, that's just for people arriving at the border getting their work authorization. But there is a huge problem where there's huge backlogs, not just for asylum, but for processing work authorization, for getting green cards, for applying for loved ones who are overseas and family members. For the refugee process in the first place, it takes a long time to go from getting referred to the refugee program to being resettled, too long. And so we need to address those backlogs. And that's where some of the funding comes in. We're calling for additional funding for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, so that they're able to really improve and facilitate increasing processing so they can get through the backlog more quickly across all this, the whole population of asylum seekers and others.
Okay. Yeah, because we are serving primarily. I've been providing direct services, and I think the challenge that we have been facing, asylum seekers, failing to have even legal representations in courts, in public.
Yeah.
They are going through a lot, and I would really love to see this being addressed. I don't know what advice you should give to us. That how can we address this?
Yes, it's a big problem. And what we've heard is that the biggest challenges are access to legal services,
Yes.
housing,
Yep.
making sure there's affordable, secure, stable housing, and mental health care as well for
Yep.
folks. And so those are three things that we really need more support from the government for. And that's where there's a couple different things we can advocate for. We can advocate for bills like the Refugee Protection Act, which includes some additional support for some of the programs that provide things like legal services. We can advocate for funding, and that's a big piece of it too, is making sure that the Office of Refugee Resettlement, some of the resettlement agencies, the local organizations, some refugee-led organizations are well supported by the government. They have resources, they have finances to make sure that people are actually getting the services that they need. So we face a tremendous scarcity of legal representation, especially pro bono legal representation.
Yeah, probably. Yes.
So it costs so much money to get a lawyer for basic things.
Yeah.
And that's a huge challenge. And Congress needs to hear that that's a big problem.
Yeah, it is. It's a big problem. I'm telling you, it's a big problem. People are stuck out there. Do you have anything that you really want to pass out to the refugee themselves and Congress or the public at large?
I would just say, again, it's so important that the stories of refugees are being told, and I hope maybe the next person in this seat is a refugee, and you can have more conversations about lifting up those stories, because that's really important, and finding ways to get those stories told to people who are in power in the administration and Congress. That's the most important thing, because the more times those stories get told, people start hearing about these challenges, people start fixing them when they're hearing about them a lot too. So it's important that we just keep the drumbeat up. Some of these things won't get solved overnight. Sometimes it takes years,
Yes.
but it's important for us to
start somewhere.
Start somewhere, and we got to
Right.
keep pushing.
Do we have the support system? I mean, like maybe donors or sponsors that we need to highlight who are really doing to ensure that this is happening?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there could always be more. There are some great organizations, Refugee Congress and Refugee Council USA, and some of the resettlement agencies are doing great work, especially in lifting up the voices of those who have experiences themselves of forced displacement. But there can always be more infrastructure that we want to build up to allow people to have their own say about what needs to be changed. And that's what's important about events like Refugee Council USA Advocacy Days, is building that infrastructure a little bit, and also creating those pathways for people to continue to have conversations with their members of Congress and meet their members of Congress, so that when they go back home, they can talk to the district staffers who are based right there in their cities and in their localities and their communities, and continue to advocate that way. And hopefully that will create some change.
I'm so happy that I'm part of this, and I've been doing this. It's almost now 3 years through Refugee Congress.
Yeah.
Thanks to Refugee Congress and the other organizations partnering with Refugee Congress to ensure that they empower refugees, they empower people like us to stand up. They provided the training to these people with lived experience in order to stand in front of those congressmen and House representatives.
Yes, it's very intimidating,
Yeah.
but it's there. We did have a training day yesterday. We before we came to the Hill, we had a training for people who had experienced forced displacement and who maybe wanted to learn a little bit more about how to advocate for some of these issues. What are the key policy asks right now? What's going on in Congress?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of resources available for people who this might be their first time doing advocacy, but they want to make their voices heard. So even if you don't have experience, you don't need to be an expert on the policy issues.
Yeah.
Again, because The most important thing is sharing your story, sharing who you are, sharing why you're there, and sharing what you want to see happen. And if you can share all those three things, and most people can share about who they are, why they care, and what they want to see changed, then you can be an effective advocate.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been there today, so I was impressed that I was able to see
Representative Ramirez.
Yes, she was really great. She was so welcoming, and she sounded like she's in touch with other people to make sure that the policies are being put in action. And I'm so grateful that I was able to engage this. Do you have any question for me?
No questions for you. Yeah. I look forward to seeing your channel grow, and excited for everything you have to come.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much. It was nice talking to you. And my audience will really love to hear more in future. And I think we are going to keep in touch.
Absolutely.
To ensure that our audience are able to know what is going on. The reason why I'm doing this is very basic. That we are here, we are sharing ideas, but the people that we are struggling for, they also need to be informed. They need to be aware of what's happening here.
Yeah.
Also, this show is all about delivering direct information from up here to them.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was so nice
meeting
you and
talking
to you. Thank you.